I'm going to be taking you from Bali to Komodo in Indonesia. Now, this is our 2-week cruise, which we run in September and October each year. And just so you can get your bearings, I'll show you whereabouts this is. Now, Indonesia straddles both Indian and Pacific Oceans, and this is outlined in red here, the whole country of Indonesia. But it's amazing that it's considered to be one country because it's made up of 17,000 different islands and 300 different languages are spoken here. There are 6 official religions observed here as well. And it's a real melting pot of different cuisines and cultures, with many islands being quite different from one another. And the country is born of fire. So this whole region has been shaped over the millennia by huge tectonic forces and the slow but unstoppable collision of the Indo-Australian and Eurasian plates. And from Bali, which is just here, I might be able to get a highlighter. That's better. So Bali, which is just here, the great volcanic arc, the great arc of volcanic islands along here stretches to the east, including Lombok and Sumbawa and Komodo, which is where we're going, and Flores. Now, some of these are now quiet volcanically, but some of them are still bubbling away, and the heat from beneath them is still going. They still awaken every now and then. All of them lie in tropical seas and home to the most diverse marine life anywhere in the world, with over 3,500 species of fish, which is more than enough to keep the even keenest snorkeler enthralled, and a fantastic array of tropical dolphins as well. Now, the arriving in Bali is really a vibrant stimulation on all of the senses, really. So we've got some cultural images here, fresh, delicious food, and offerings which are given to the spirits on a daily basis, and they're sort of left out on the streets everywhere. The locals will put an offering, they'll put one there. And this is our hotel where we'll stay on the first night when we arrive in Bali before we get on the boat. Now, the hotel has got lovely chalet-type huts right on the beach. It's a fantastic place to wander around. There's culture everywhere. There are hidden shrines amongst the hotel grounds. All of these photos are taken just on the hotel grounds here, which show off signs of worship. Bali's official religion is Hindu, but it's far too animistic to be considered the same vein as Indian Hinduism. The Balinese worship the trinity of Brahma and Shiva and Vishnu. So these are 3 aspects of the one invisible God, amongst many other gods, such as the gods of earth, fire, water, mountains, gods of fertility, rice, even technology and books. The black and white checks that you see here on this spiritual statue, they're everywhere, and they have a deep spiritual meaning. They symbolize Balinese philosophy of Wa Binida, which is balance and harmony. So it's not unlike the Chinese yin and yang symbol. And we'll go for dinner on a little beach restaurant, which is just actually to the left of the swimming pool there. And there's a huge sumptuous breakfast waiting for us the next morning by the pool too, which is lovely. And then we board our vessel, which is home for the next 9 days. And this is a typical day. We'll get up and go for an early morning snorkel after a very light breakfast. Then we come back on board and we have a full hot breakfast as we move into deeper water, and we spend the whole day looking for cetaceans. And we'll be sailing east because we've got a lot of ground to cover on this trip as well, sailing from Bali all the way to Komodo National Park. And then late afternoon or in the evening, we'll have another snorkel again, and then we'll have an evening talk. So we use these 2 vessels. We typically use the Mermaid 1, which is the one in the foreground there, but we occasionally charter the Mermaid 2 in the background. And of course, we do full charters of these boats. So it's a dedicated Naturetrek wildlife holiday. And these are a couple of photos of the Mermaid 1, which I was on just 4 weeks ago. It's a really lovely boat. It's a 5-star motor yacht, and the crew are extremely attentive. And it's one of my favorite boats to work on. It's really well crewed and fantastic. So the first starting point of our trip, we've just left Bali, and then we start to sail east through the Lombok Strait and to the north side of Lombok. Now, we've barely even left before this is starting to get really exciting already, because overnight we'll cross the line of Wallacea, which is an invisible line here. And this is where naturalist Alfred Wallace, the co-discoverer of evolution by the process of natural selection, along with, of course, Charles Darwin, noted on his travels that Asian flora and fauna gave way to Australasian flora and fauna. He'd been traveling around what was then known as the Malay Archipelago for 8 years, and he landed on Lombok, and he expected to hear the sounds of woodpeckers, fruit thrushes, oriental barbets that he'd heard so often in Malaysia and Borneo and Bali. But instead he was met with the piercing call of the helmeted friarbird and Australian cockatoos. And this is because 17,000 years ago, during the last ice age, the planet's sea levels were much lower, and obviously the water was locked up as ice. So the last mass on the west here was actually all one. This is all joined. However, there's a trench between Bali and Lombok, which is about 1,000 meters deep, and this never went away. And it's about 23 miles across, and it was sufficient enough to allow separation of species. And this led Wallace to co-discover the process of natural selection by evolution. So really interesting and a notable spot. So I often tell people just to feel for a bump in the middle of the night as we cross over it. So this is typical scenery. This is the island of Satonda. And this is a really lovely volcanic island, as you can tell. So we've got a really gorgeous view of a caldera there. So we stop off at islands like these frequently. This is an extinct volcano, a really lovely spot to snorkel around. There's no one else about, so we have the reef to ourselves. We'll stay here for the night, and we'll often wait for the sunset, because sunder fruit bats, which roost on this island, will leave their roosts and they'll fly over to the neighbouring island of Sumbawa. So once in position with our binoculars, we can just sit and wait for all of these bats to leave their roosts, and they go over our heads in the hundreds. And the reason they choose to roost on Satonda is because they're away from any disturbance by humans, dogs, or other animals which might predate them. But there's so many of them, there's nowhere near enough food on the island of Satonda, that small volcanic island there, to support them. So they fly over to the huge, enormous island of Sumbawa to feed on the abundant fruit which is growing on the hillsides. And as we're snorkeling, you can sometimes get good views of them during the day as well, just while they're roosting, which is quite sweet. And we have 2 zodiacs on board to run us over to the reefs. So this is my group here getting ready to go in, and we do this with various degrees of elegance. The eager ones amongst us can just fling yourself backwards off the boat, but we do have a ladder as well, where you can just go in at your own pace, and there's always a helping hand from myself and the crew on board. Just next to my yellow fins there, they've got a cooler, and everyone has a bottle of water in there which is numbered, and you've got a number on the underside of your fins. So when you get off the boat and you hand your fins to the driver, they check what number your fins are, they get your bottle of water for you and hand it to you as you sit down. The service is just fantastic. So you've got a lovely refreshing drink waiting for you when you're back on board these ribs. And life under the waves is just another world. This is one of my favorite snorkel sites. This is actually off Rinshare. This is called Yellow Wall, and there's another spot called Crinoid Canyon, and these are crinoids here, these feather stars. And the cliff walls are just carpeted with coral, and you really don't need to swim far at all to enjoy snorkels. And I say to guests, you don't need to swim hard. You don't need, there's no medals to be awarded for going the furthest distance on a snorkel whatsoever. Just float and enjoy. You can hover somewhere for 15 minutes and still be seeing new things. And it's like being in your very own episode of Blue Planet, with all the different creatures that you can see. We've got 2 nudibranchs here at the top, which are sea slokes. And nudibranch means naked gill, so nude branch. They look like little branches, these little antennae like structures that they have at the top of their head here. And these are their gills. So these are only about 1 inch long, so they can be really, really tricky to find. But myself and the dive guides have got our eye in, and we can be spotting these things and pointing them out to you. Some anemone fish there on the bottom, and an octopus on the bottom left. And a great diversity of fish, but not only fish, of corals too. So some lovely tabletop coral in the background there. And great variation in colour, and some of them are stunningly beautiful and make a point of standing out on the reef to be seen, like this mandarin fish here. But others opt for camouflage, and there are 2 fish in this image, and I wonder if you can see them. I'll give you a few seconds, but there are ghost pipefish here, and they're floating with their heads down vertically in the water. So this is their tail, the tail of one of them, and the body and the head, and then this is the second one here in the background. Incredible. And they just hang vertically in the water like this, and they'll sway back and forth. They don't really do much swimming. They'll just go with the current back and forth to resemble seagrass. Absolutely astonishing. And this is one with a much more contrasting background, so you can actually see much better what they look like. Plenty of turtles to be found as well. This is a hawksbill turtle, but we'll see good numbers of hawksbill turtles and green turtles while we're out snorkeling. And it's quite nice to observe their behavior out on the reefs, because quite often they'll be down eating on both the hard corals and the soft corals, and they can use their flippers just to move all the coral out the way that they don't want. And this lifts up lots of extra bits of coral and bits of food that they're sort of chewing up and eating, and it makes a whole sort of feeding frenzy for lots of different other fish, particularly butterfly fishes and wrasses will swim all around the turtle, benefiting from all of the food that it's churning up and providing for them. And the plankton-rich areas are good for manta rays, which are just absolutely fabulous to see. And we really hope to see them on the trip. I've seen them on all but one of my trips to Indonesia. So these are reef mantas. They're about 3 or 4 meters across, but we can also occasionally see oceanic mantas, which are about 6 or 7 meters. And manta rays aren't the only large animals here which are feeding on the plankton. In more recent years, we've also been seeing whale sharks. So we saw them on our trip last month and also saw them last year. And this is the largest fish in the world, growing up to 12 meters. And they're gentle giants. They feed on plankton, so they're just filtering zooplankton and phytoplankton out of the water. And we hope to have the opportunity to snorkel with them too. And in fact, this is me 4 weeks ago, just having a little chat with a whale shark, which was one of those pinch me moments, just coming face to face with one, which was just fantastic. This was about 7 meters in length, this one, so just over half the size that they actually get to. So just amazing to think they can grow up to 12 meters. Incredible. And lots of birds that we'll be seeing at sea as well, which I'll flick through fairly quickly, but lesser frigate birds, lesser crested tern, red-footed booby. So we're always out on the lookout for birds at the front of the boat. We'll get off for sunset walks as well. This is Padar. If any of you have been to the Galapagos, it might look quite familiar with the similar volcanic topography which has formed the bays here. So there's 3 bays, and we can walk up to this lovely spot here, viewpoint, to look for the sunset, to watch the sunset and see it go down, which is lovely. And Komodo National Park, which we'll arrive at after sort of 5 or 6 days, is a landscape of contrasts between rugged hillsides of dry savanna and pockets of thorny green vegetation, but then brilliant white sandy beaches and blue waters just lapping over coral reefs. So it's unquestionably one of the most dramatic landscapes in all of Indonesia. And this is where we're at now. So the park's located in the center of the Indonesian archipelago between the islands of Sumbawa and Flores, and it has 3 major islands in it, which are Komodo here and Rinca, and Padar, which is the one I just showed you of the sunset photograph. So we'll go to at least Komodo and Rinca, which is where we have our opportunity for seeing some extra wildlife as well. So we get to the islands early morning, and the beauty of having our own private charter is that we can anchor offshore the night before and just leave the boat at 6:45 in the morning after a light breakfast and be onshore for 5 minutes later. It takes 30 seconds to run on shore, but then we're there before any other boats, and we get rangers to ourselves, and we can just enjoy the cool temperatures as well. Wildlife isn't typically active in the heat of the day. It can get very hot here after 9 a.m. So we want to make the most of the cooler temperatures, and we'll do our exploring at this time. So there are deer to be seen and wild pigs as well, but wherever there is prey items, there are going to be predators, and that's what a lot of people come here for and go on this trip for. This is the Komodo dragon, and it's the most remarkable inhabitant of the national park. can reach 2.5 to 3 meters in length, weigh up to about 90 kilos. And they're the largest lizards in the world. And they'll feed on wild pigs, deer, water buffaloes. And it's long been thought that they kill their prey by having a large amount of bacteria in their saliva. This is true, but we now know that they also have venom glands in their mouth, similar to snakes. So it's mild venom acts as an anticoagulant. So they bite their prey and wait for it to die. They'll stalk it and then they go and feed. And they don't typically wander too far, the Komodos. They can walk up to about 7 miles a day, but they seem to prefer staying quite close to home. They rarely venture far from the valleys in which they were hatched. And these giant lizards just don't live anywhere else in the world. And they're of great scientific interest from an evolutionary point of view, because the species is the last representative relic of a relic population of large lizards that once lived in Indonesia and Australia. And we'll have 3 opportunities to see them, once on Komodo, once on Rincha, and then another time by Zodiac cruise, where we go and see them on the beach. This is just a small one here. And there'll be birding to be had as well when we're doing our land walks. Yellow-crested cockatoo, critically endangered due to poaching for the pet trade. It's really lovely to see them flying overhead in pairs. And the absolutely stunning green jungle fowl, really lovely and resplendent, where you see all of the colours just hitting the feathers there. Absolutely gorgeous. Orange-footed scrubfowl. Now these make huge nests, and the Komodos actually use their nests to lay their eggs in. So they'll steal the nest, sorry, of the scrubfowl. Olive-back sunbird, Brahminy kites. We're quite frequent to see them flying overhead, along with white-bellied fish eagle. And when we go along sort of mangrove habitat, we see lots of herons and things. Also see collared kingfisher, which are nice. And we'll look out for cetaceans as we're into the deeper water. Now, we never know what we're going to see. So every day is a day where we're just out looking and hoping to see a splash or a blow, but there's so much excitement whenever we do see something. But I spotted this sperm whale on one of our recent trips, and it was miles away, but we caught up with it. And one of the crew on board actually had a drone with him. So he sent the drone up, and regardless of what you may think of drones, I don't personally like them too much myself, but for seeing cetaceans, they really have completely revolutionized the way that we can view cetaceans. And we sent the drone up and watched this sperm whale from a screen live on the boat, and it just added such a huge extra dimension to our experience of this encounter. We could see all of the white marks around the front of the sperm whale's mouth, so this suggests this is an older male, and it's these white marks around its mouth are from squid. So it feeds on large squid, and the squid's tentacles and the beaks will make these scratches around its mouth. But also it has a rake mark down its back, which is probably from another sperm whale because of the separation in between all of those lines there. Could be the teeth of a sperm whale. Lots of other different species to see as well. These are melon-headed whales here, which are a member of the blackfish family. So same family as the orca, the killer whale, or pilot whales. We'll also possibly see false killer whales. I actually had a false killer whale breaching right in front of the boat when I was there last year, which was fantastic, really quite large animals. Plus lots of dolphins. You get dolphins every day. So spinner dolphins, spotted dolphins, rissos, and Frasers. Other possible species include blue whales, Cuvier's beaked whale, dwarf sperm whales. We had rough-toothed dolphin on my trip last month. These are pantropical spotted dolphin. They don't look particularly spotted. This species was actually named because of the Atlantic spotted dolphin, which in the Bahamas are very pale and have a lot of black dark spots. This is a pantropical spotted dolphin, but in the tropics they don't have particularly strong spots, so they really should be called the lightly freckled dolphin, but never mind. And these are Fraser's dolphins here. They quite typically have pink bellies, and this is because they don't have pigment on their bellies, and they're getting quite hot and flushed in the warm water as they're splashing around. And we end by sailing back to Bali, and this photo here was taken just on our last night as we were surrounded by about 100 melon-headed whales. You can just see a few black specks on the picture there in the water just around the sunset. And you can see the peak of Mount Rinjani, which is the active volcano on Lombok. And once we return to Bali, should anyone wish to do an extension, we travel to the northwest of Bali, where we visit Bali Barat National Park. And I'll just whiz onto that very quickly for 30 seconds before I hand over to Tim. So we arrive back here and then we drive, it's about 5.5 hours to Bali Barat National Park here, where we stay at the fantastic Manjangan Resort. Our accommodation is stunning. It's completely secluded in this lovely lodge in the heart of the park. So we stay in these tranquil bungalows and go birding every day. And this is a bird watcher's extension. But if you don't want to go bird watching, then in lieu of that, you can have a massage at the spa, relax on the beach while sipping out of a coconut, or go snorkeling on the coral reef next to the bar. We'll go out birding in the morning and then again sort of mid to late afternoon. And the two real sort of highlight species of the birding extension is the Javan banded pitta, which you can see hopping around in the leaf litter amongst the bushes. We positioned ourselves to get a good view of this and marveled at just the stunning plumage of this lovely bird, which was lit up in the sunlight only about 4 or 5 meters away from us. And also the main highlight is the Bali starling. They're critically endangered and highly sought after from the pet trade, but there's a reintroduction program on the island and they've got a little breeding centre there which we can go and visit. So I will end there, back on a sunset. Thank you very much for listening. And if any of you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. But for now, I'll hand back over to Tim.